But first, I've got to get this off my chest. If last weekend's Black Lives Matter protests weren't selfish enough because of how protesters risked the lives of others, well, we discovered today that their actions may have also delayed the reopening of our borders and a large number of workplaces. Of course, those who wanted to try and make a tenuous connection between the homicide of George Floyd and police attitudes to Indigenous youth in Australia didn't give a damn. They didn't give a damn about the health of those who are most at risk from COVID-19, the nation's elderly, nor did they give a damn about their own rural communities where there are tens of thousands of very vulnerable Aborigines. But even if, as is predicted today, the lack of social distancing has delayed the easing of restrictions by just a week, this is the damage. $1,000 million for 7 days. 2 weeks, double it. To the irresponsible and reckless protesters, thank you very much for that. You obviously don't run a small business where owners are helplessly watching their livelihoods get flushed down the toilet. Maybe many of those who protested are relying heavily on government handouts. I don't know. And of course, government handouts are only growing in size, so there's no danger of not getting any further money from the government or the taxpayer, because I can't think of any other reason why so many would be so reckless as we saw on Saturday. Can you? A week of nothing equals no income, higher debt, personal heartache, and who knows what horrific personal actions will follow. The whole comparison between black deaths at the hands of police in the United States and here is such an inaccurate and long bow. Now, New South Wales MP Mark Latham nailed the lack of connection on Paul's show late last night.
The apparatus of the media, academia, arts funding, cultural groups, websites have piled in with the biggest bunch of fake news we've ever seen in this nation's history. Starting with the notion that 432 Indigenous have been murdered in the prison system or police custody. The figure is actually zero. In the last 30 years, you can't identify a prison guard or a police officer who's murdered any Indigenous.
Now, last night when I caught up with the Indigenous Affairs Minister, he cited 2 cases that occurred since the Royal Commission, but by any measurement, it is nowhere near the significant trend it is in the United States. And you know what irks me the most about what we saw on the weekend? The way in which one man was treated at the Sydney rally. Remember this bloke who bravely stood on the steps carrying a placard, "All lives matter." He was absolutely right to stand there and say that. This is what happened to him, though. I think that fellow, who I spoke to on my Sunday radio program on 2GB and 4BC, deserves praise because he didn't wish to single out a colour. He was the only one there not singling out a colour. He wanted to make a non-racist point about protecting life.
It wasn't premeditated at all. And during the week, there'd been various conversations with me, my friends and my colleagues, and we all talked about this idea that, hold on a second, what's happening here? Because the message that is being sent out by these protesters is that really they want to shift in power. They want to focus in on one particular race or creed or colour or prejudice. And we believe that all lives matter. We all bleed red. And yes, of course, Black Lives Matters. Yes, of course, white lives, Asian, disabled, gay, whatever is your situation, you matter, including the police and anybody that walks this God-green earth. And that's really the message that should be on the agenda.
We all bleed red. Anyway, thanks to those protesters, we'll have people contract the virus probably that didn't need to. The National Cabinet, which will meet on Friday, will probably ditch plans to lift restrictions, maybe even for as long as 2 more weeks, as long as we start determining whether this has had any effect on our overnight infections. And we all know what Queensland will do, keep the borders closed for even longer. And then, as Treasury estimates, that will cost the country another $6.3 billion a month. Money, businesses, livelihoods and jobs are immaterial to some people. But you can be sure that these have just added enormously to the grief and suffering of so many hard-working Australians.